Welcome to our channel, your trusted news aggregator bringing you the most important stories from around the world in one convenient place. We save you time by carefully selecting and presenting the key events shaping our world today, so you don't have to search through countless sources. If you value staying informed efficiently, please hit that subscribe button and give us a like right now. The world stands on the edge of a diplomatic crisis tonight, and it's unfolding in the snow-covered mountains of Switzerland, Davos. The name alone carries weight. For decades, this exclusive gathering has been where the global elite shake hands, make deals, and chart the course of nations. But this year, something is different. Something is breaking. President Donald Trump arrived with demands that have sent shockwaves through European capitals. He wants Greenland. And he's threatening 10% tariffs on 8 European nations, including Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Finland, if they stand in his way. These are America's closest allies, NATO partners, and Trump has made it clear there can be no going back. The numbers tell a dramatic story. 3,000 leaders from 130 countries have descended upon this Swiss resort town. 65 heads of state and government, 850 top CEOs, all gathered under a theme that now seems almost ironic, a spirit of dialogue. But dialogue is the last thing happening here. Trump announced on social media that he agreed to meet with various parties about Greenland during the World Economic Forum. He declared the acquisition imperative for national and world security. When asked by reporters if he would use force to seize the Arctic island, he refused to answer. Instead, he posted private text messages from French President Emmanuel Macron and NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte to his social media accounts, a move that shocked diplomatic circles worldwide. European leaders are scrambling. Commission President Ursula von der Leyen called Trump's tariff threats a mistake, stating that when friends shake hands, it must mean something. She met with a bipartisan congressional delegation to discuss both Russia's war in Ukraine and the escalating tensions around Greenland. Denmark sent troops to Greenland for military exercises. Trump viewed this as provocation and immediately announced new tariffs. 8 European nations responded with a joint statement, warning that such threats undermine transatlantic relations and risk a dangerous downward spiral. Mark Rutte, NATO's Secretary-General, confirmed he spoke with Trump over the weekend and would see him in Davos. In a posting on social media, Trump revealed Rutte's private message, declaring they had a very good call concerning Greenland and that everyone agrees there can be no going back. But here's where the story takes an even darker turn. If you're finding this coverage valuable, make sure you're subscribed and tap that like button. We're bringing you the facts that matter, and your support helps us continue. United Nations Secretary-General António Guterres has been watching all of this unfold, and just days before Davos, he delivered what may be the most important speech of his tenure. Standing before the UN General Assembly, his words were stark and uncompromising. The context is chaos, Guterres declared. We are a world brimming with conflict, impunity, inequality, and unpredictability. He didn't name names, but everyone knew exactly who he was talking about. Guterres described a world where international law is being trampled, where leaders pick and choose which rules to follow, where cooperation itself is being put on what he called death watch. He warned that when leaders run roughshod over international law, they're not just undermining global order, they're setting a perilous precedent that will echo for generations. The paradox, he said, is devastating. At the very moment when international cooperation is most desperately needed, the world seems least inclined to use it or invest in it. Wholesale cuts in development and humanitarian aid are shaking the foundations of global cooperation, and he didn't stop there. Guterres emphasized 3 fundamental principles that must guide the world forward: respect for international law without exception, including protection of civilians and human rights, ending conflicts while addressing their root causes through development and climate action, and reform of global institutions because, as he put it, 1945 problem-solving will not solve 2026 problems. Now both men are in Davos, Trump and Guterres, the president who demands territorial acquisition through economic threats, and the UN chief who warns that the very fabric of international order is unraveling. The Atlantic Council published an analysis that cuts to the heart of the crisis. They noted that there is very little spirit and even less dialogue between Trump and his European counterparts right now. Relations between Washington and Brussels were upended after Trump's Saturday morning social media post threatening tariffs. The article highlights the most troubling dimension. On trade, there's always deal space. Cut some tariffs, pledge investment, reach an agreement. Europe knows how to play that game. But Greenland is different. What compromise could Europe possibly offer that would satisfy Trump? And more chillingly, will he be satisfied by anything short of Greenland coming into U.S. possession? Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent appeared on CNBC trying to calm the markets, stating that the U.S. is back and this is what U.S. leadership looks like. He urged partners to take a deep breath and let tensions play out. When pressed about Greenland, Bessent said U.S. control was important and would stop any kind of kinetic war, adding, "Why not preempt the problem before it starts?" Before we continue with what happened next, if this in-depth coverage is helping you understand the crisis, please subscribe and like this video. It helps us reach more people who need this information. But European leaders aren't buying it. The Washington Post reported that Trump's demands have transformed this week's gathering of the global elite into an emergency diplomatic summit. European leaders are preparing to use the president's arrival to de-escalate what they're calling a spiraling crisis. And Trump keeps escalating. Overnight, he announced 200% tariffs on French wines and champagne because President Macron hasn't joined his new initiative around Gaza. He accused the United Kingdom of showing total weakness for agreeing to hand sovereignty of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. Danish Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen traveled to the UK for emergency consultations. He posted on social media that in turbulent times, close allies are crucial, and Denmark and the UK stand close together. They agreed on the need for stronger NATO engagement in the Arctic and closer security cooperation. Dutch Foreign Minister David Van Wiel told NBC News that world leaders now have to take into account that Trump might post their private messages to him in public. He called it part of the new diplomacy. Think about that for a moment. The new diplomacy, where private communications between heads of state can be weaponized on social media at any moment, where treaty obligations that have held for 70 years can be threatened with tariffs announced in a weekend post, where the foundation of the Western alliance itself is being tested in real time. European leaders announced they will hold a crisis meeting Thursday in Brussels to map out their response. The mood is described as one of deep uncertainty about whether to pursue some kind of deal based on practical realities or draw a hard line on sovereignty, international law, and ultimately, Europe's credibility. Trump told reporters late Monday that he didn't expect his European allies to push back too much on his Greenland ambitions. He said he has a lot of messages for Davos and promised the meetings would be very interesting. Meanwhile, the Global Risks Report published by the World Economic Forum for 2026 identifies geoeconomic confrontation as the most severe threat facing the world. Not climate change, not pandemic risk, geoeconomic confrontation. The erosion of multilateralism due to the proliferation of international conflict. This brings us back to António Guterres and his warning. He spoke about larger forces and megatrends shaping our world, about how geopolitical divisions are widening even as cuts to development and humanitarian funding accelerate, about how multilateralism itself is being tested, and he made a promise. "Let me assure you," he said, "that I will make every day of 2026 count. I am fully committed and fully determined to keep working, to keep fighting, and to keep pushing for the better world that we know is possible." Strong words, but the question hanging over Davos tonight is whether words matter anymore in a world where tariffs speak louder than treaties. If you want to stay informed about how this crisis develops, subscribe now and turn on notifications. This is a story that will shape the world for years to come. The next 72 hours in Davos could determine the future of the transatlantic alliance. Trump is scheduled to deliver his special address Wednesday morning. Guterres has already spoken, laying out his vision for international cooperation. European leaders are huddling in private meetings, trying to find some pathway through this crisis that doesn't end in economic warfare or the collapse of NATO. Capital Economics published an analysis asking whether cooler heads will prevail before things get out of hand in either markets or geopolitics. Edward Yardney, president of Yardney Research, noted that this is one of those be-ready-for-anything weeks. most of them related to the president. Trade lawyer Ted Murphy wrote to clients that suggestions the tariff uncertainty of 2025 may be ebbing may not turn out to be the case. The uncertainty created by U.S. tariff policy is almost certain to continue throughout 2026, and that uncertainty is what makes this moment so dangerous. Markets hate uncertainty. Alliances fracture under uncertainty. And in an uncertain world, mistakes happen, miscalculations occur. Lines get crossed that can't be uncrossed. Trump's demand for Greenland isn't happening in isolation. It follows his threats to take the Panama Canal, his rejection of the International Criminal Court's authority, his withdrawal from international agreements, his open questioning of NATO's relevance. Each action, viewed alone, might seem like typical Trump provocativeness. But together, they paint a picture of something far more fundamental. A wholesale reimagining of America's role in the world. And Europe is caught in an impossible position. Give in to Trump's demands, and they validate the principle that might makes right, that economic coercion works, that international law means nothing. Stand firm, and they risk a trade war with their most important ally, potential abandonment in the face of Russian aggression, and the effective end of the post-World War II order that has prevented major power conflict for 8 decades. Greenland itself sits at the center of this storm, a self-governing territory of Denmark with 56,000 people, rich in rare earth minerals critical for modern technology, strategically positioned in the Arctic as climate change opens new shipping routes and resources, and home to Thule Air Base, where the United States already has military presence under a 1951 defense agreement. Make sure you're subscribed and have notifications on because this story is far from over. Greenlandic Foreign Minister Vivian Motzfeldt stated after meetings with NATO officials that it's important to know how to work with security in the Arctic. Denmark has emphasized that Greenland is not for sale, but Trump has made clear he views the existing defense agreement as inadequate. The broader implications are staggering. If the United States can threaten tariffs to force territorial concessions from allies, what prevents other powers from doing the same? If international law can be discarded when inconvenient, what remains of the rules-based international order? If private diplomatic communications can be weaponized on social media, how can sensitive negotiations ever succeed? These are the questions keeping diplomats awake at night in capitals across Europe. These are the issues that will be debated in hushed conversations in Davos hotel lobbies and conference rooms. These are the stakes of this crisis. António Guterres warned that we cannot allow self-defeating geopolitical divides and brazen violations of international law to define our era. He called for a world where dialogue replaces confrontation, where cooperation overcomes division, where the institutions built from the ashes of World War II are reformed rather than abandoned. But Trump sees those same institutions as obstacles to American interests. He views cooperation through the lens of who's getting the better deal. He treats international law as suggestions rather than obligations, and he's betting that Europe will blink first. Will they? That's what the next few days will reveal. The theme of Davos this year, a spirit of dialogue, now seems less like a hopeful aspiration and more like a desperate plea. Can dialogue bridge the gap between Trump's territorial demands and Europe's defensive sovereignty? Can conversation prevent the slide toward economic warfare? Can meetings in Swiss mountain resorts save the Western alliance? Or are we witnessing something darker? The beginning of a new era where power matters more than principle, where threats trump treaties, where the strong do what they will and the weak suffer what they must. Before we close, I want to emphasize why you should subscribe, like, and share this video. Traditional media is fragmented. You have to visit dozens of sites to piece together the full story. We do that work for you, bringing verified facts from multiple sources into one comprehensive narrative. We save you time and help you understand the connections between events. That's our promise to you. History may look back on these January days in Davos as a turning point, the moment when the post-war order either found a way to evolve and survive, or finally shattered under the weight of its own contradictions and the force of nationalist ambition. 3,000 leaders are gathered in a Swiss resort town. But the real question is whether any of them have the power, the vision, or the will to prevent the crisis that's unfolding before their eyes. Trump has his demands. Europe has its principles. Guterres has his warnings, and the world is watching to see what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. The next 72 hours will tell us everything we need to know. Subscribe now, turn on notifications, and stay informed as this story develops. Because what happens in Davos this week will echo across the globe for years to come. This is the news that matters. This is the story you need to understand. And this is why our channel exists, to cut through the noise and deliver the facts that shape our world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, like, and we'll see you in the next update as this crisis continues to unfold.